Welcome to Complicating the Narrative, a podcast that takes on the challenging questions in public health by embracing complexity rather than avoiding it. I'm your host, Salma Abdallah. Today's episode is a bit different. I'm joined by my mentor and colleague, Sandro Galea, who's the Dean of WashU School of Public Health, to introduce a new project that we're launching together, the Purple Public Health Project. The project grows out of a shared concern that public health is losing its ability to persuade, to listen, and at times to think across disagreements in the US in particular. This conversation is our attempt to model what we're proposing. Sandro and I do not agree on everything when it comes to public health, and we definitely do not agree on everything when it comes to the Purple Public Health Project. And you will hear that today. In this conversation, we lay out what the project is, what it's not, and what success might look like. Sandro, welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you, Salma. It's good to be here.
Yeah, I must admit, I know we're launching a new project today, but also I have an ulterior motive because our first episode did very well. So I thought, okay, how can I actually get you to join me for a second episode?
I feel like maybe we're tempting fate. Maybe no one's going to listen to this one.
Yeah. Well, now I'm going to take it back. I'm very excited about the conversation we're having today because it's about a project, about an idea you and I discussed for a while. I think it's been simmering in the background, and it's great that we're pushing it forward right now. And hopefully the world would think it's an interesting and helpful addition to the conversation around public health. So we wanted to talk today, more of a conversation, less than me interviewing you, about the Purple Public Health Project. My way of trying to engage with this project, and hopefully this is in our conversation today, but also throughout this project, is we're really mostly thinking out loud because we think this is the best way to think through what we both think is a difficult topic that needs to be addressed in public health, but we're also hoping that people engage with us, push back, give us more ideas on how we make this project concrete. So maybe let's just first start with you telling us a bit about Purple Public Health and where it came from.
Yeah, so the idea behind the Purple Public Health is, it starts with the metaphor purple, right? It is not red, not blue, but it's purple. The word purple, which obviously was popularized by then Senator Obama, I think has come to connote trying to find a space which brings people together from different sides of the political aisle. I don't think what we're doing is strictly about different sides from political aisle, but we're using it as a metaphor for trying to learn how we reach people of all stripes with different ideologies, different perspectives. And the idea behind the Purple Public Health Project then is, how can we start a conversation in the field about how to do that, how to break down the challenges that the field has had in reaching people who really see the world differently than most of us in public health. It is not, I think it's important that we put this out there right at the beginning, it is not about going back on what the values are that animate public health. It is about learning how we bring more people into the tent, because we talk a lot about public health being a big tent, and it is, after all, public health. It's about the public. But the data, I think, are pretty clear, and experience of recent years are pretty clear that we're not anywhere near as good as we can be at truly reaching the public who is inclined to disagree with us. So I think what we're trying to do here is generate a conversation, create some products, some ideas, some podcasts, some essays, some reading lists, some teaching guides that all of us in public health can engage with, agree with, disagree with, but shift our thinking a little bit. It's perhaps an effort in slowly shifting how we think and learning together.
And why do we think this is a project that is needed right now?
I think it's hard not to think it's needed right now. We are at a moment in time where public health in 2025 was under challenge from the political establishment like never before. Now, we can say, well, it's a particular set of political actors in the White House who have an animus towards public health. But these same political actors would not have been able to do what they've been able to do if there were a groundswell of popular support in defense of public health. We in public health found ourselves on the defensive because this political action against public health comes on the heels of a pandemic where we in public health struggled. We struggled to meet people where they were. We struggled to persuade people. We struggled with convincing people of the science of what we knew and what we did not know. And I don't think there's any secret about these struggles. And I don't think that labeling the struggles is admitting weakness. I think what labeling the struggle is being honest with ourselves and saying, there are areas we need to learn how to do better, how to bring in more people into how we are thinking. And this feels to me, and I think to us in our conversations, like really the big challenge of public health in the next decade.
But couldn't one argue, and I fully agree with you, I think also my concern here is that not only that clearly we've lost our ground, where some political actors then found public health to be something that could be polarized within a population. I think we are looking into some data, you and I, it seems like because now the Republican Party took over what they think is needed to be addressed in public health, a lot more Democrats now, at least in polling data, are saying we might not trust public health anymore. So then the issue becomes maybe half of the country would almost always just be in disagreement with what type of interventions need to be done. It might risk becoming something that, depending on the political party in power, when you ask about public health, people who vote for the other party are just going to think we can't trust this. It's actually, for me, it's a reminder of when you ask people polling data about the economy. I think it shifted, I might be wrong, it shifted about 10 years ago. Depending on your political party, you ask people, what do you think is happening with the economy? It used to be in the past that there was some decoupling. I actually might be wrong. It might be Obama time. There might be some decoupling between, oh, this is not my political party. But if the economy is actually doing well, people would say, I think the economy is doing well. But increasingly now, asking people about the economy is just an indicator of who they voted for. Because if they're Republicans, they will say the economy is doing well when there's a Republican leader. But if there's a Democrat, then the Democrats say, oh, it's doing badly if it's under a Republican leader, and the other way around. So to me, at least, that's a main concern of how do we make public health something that people think of it as grounded in science. And yes, we have our values, and instead of thinking of it as something that is based on who's leading the government at a certain point. I don't know if that resonates with how you think about it.
When you put it that way, you actually make it sound scarier than I was thinking about it. And perhaps it is. We talk a lot about trust lately, and I always worry whenever we start talking about a particular topic, it becomes superficial and we're not thinking about it hard enough. So maybe it's helpful to think of it as concrete topic. Let's take a concrete topic. And I'll take a difficult topic intentionally, which is access to abortion. Abortion and reproductive rights are core to what we do and how we think about public health. That's a value. You have X% of the country, maybe 40% of the country, who really has a difficult time with abortion for faith-based and cultural reasons. The question is, how do we reconcile those two? And how do we create a big tent approach to such a difficult issue without compromising the reproductive rights that are very much at the heart of the areas that we in public health need to push forward, need to make sure is part of our agenda. And I don't know how to do that. I do not know how to take something that is so much at the heart of what we are trying to do, but that is so difficult in the public conversation, and how to bring those two together. In part, I suppose I see us, you and I, launching this public health project as a way of trying to launch that conversation, because I want to learn about what we can do. I realize that reproductive rights this is a really difficult issue, but there are other difficult issues. I mean, issues, for example, like how do you bring along a population on safe syringe disposal efforts to reduce the transmission of infectious disease when such efforts are widely unpopular, particularly when we have seen efforts at decriminalizing certain drugs backfire in terms of public disorder. I mean, these are complicated issues. And what seems clear to me is only one thing, which is that us taking a rigid approach that says, no, this is a value set. Unless you come along with us, we're not going to talk to you. That's not going to work. So how do we create the space to have these conversations? And maybe you have the answer to all this. I'm actually hoping to learn from you and from us as we move this forward. But I find these very difficult issues.
Yeah, I certainly do not have the answer. I think I'm wondering, though, is it a value? So when we say reproductive rights are at the heart of public health, and I think this is the tension I am trying to understand as we engage with this project, are we stating a value here as public health, or are we stating science that says, from a public health perspective, at least the science says almost all abortions, if they're done in a medical setting, they are done safely. That seems to have a general benefit to the public. So that's like the scientific part of it. I guess the value then comes on top of it, where then it becomes an issue with what type of policy implement. But how do you engage with that? I'm really wondering about that. Like, how do we differentiate science from values? Yeah.
I almost feel like your question is leading me to give you the answer, which is, well, it's about the science. But I think that's too easy, and it's almost a cop-out. And it's I actually think we are about the science and about the values, and we can't escape that. So I started us off with a really difficult topic, abortion, reproductive rights. But let's take a step back, and let's go to now, because of your question, to perhaps a less difficult topic, which is speed limits. I mean, the science is very clear that if you have speed limits that are lower throughout the country, we will save lives. That's the science. So if you are saying to me, well, maybe we should just lean into science, well, then nobody should ever drive over 25 miles per hour. It is fundamentally a value that we allow speed limits to be higher. And I think it's okay to admit that.
Interesting. I was thinking, why not 15? Or why not actually maybe just bringing us to the 21st century? We know now that autonomous vehicles are much safer than human beings driving.
So maybe what we should do is we should launch a movement in public health for autonomous vehicles and no humans driving.
Yes. But I think that's the difficult question. That's what you and I are trying to get into, because then if I do an analysis on this, what do I include? Because when we do autonomous vehicles, some people might say, I just love driving. I love getting into a car that is a convertible car with my hair. I mean, I don't have a lot of hair here, but like with my hair in the
you and I both.
Yeah. Or I think, well, also some people might add into the analysis that people who are going to lose their jobs because of having autonomous cars, and does that affect their health outcomes? I think this is the hard question I'm trying to get into, and I'm not trying to say we know this is the science, because I agree with you. I think it's a question that I'm hoping to engage with as well. Like, at what point do we say even asking a scientific question in a certain way is baked in with the values? So this is almost true. Like almost all the questions we ask in public health are based on our values.
Well,
what do you think?
Let's take the word values. Because taking a step back, I said, look, in public health, we do science and we do values. Fine. Let's just label that. Now let's take the word values. The word values, again, is this abstract word. Well, what do we mean by values? What values means is there are certain concepts that we think are worthwhile, even if they have a real cost. So let's take another value. I think core to public health is the value that we want as many people as possible to be as healthy as possible for as long as possible, and narrowing health gaps so that no people are left behind. That is a value. Now, that value sometimes may come up against what the science tells us may be a more efficient way of gaining health for some people. So, for example, and I've written a little bit about this in one of my books, it's not that difficult to do the math where a particular screening program, for example, would result in more early detection of cancer, let's say a colonoscopy screening program, if you put all your resources into screening only high income, high status individuals, because you can reduce their cancer rates substantially and you reduce cancer in the population. So as a result, your net population health goes down. I would argue that that runs counter to our value, that we're trying to make sure that we do not leave people behind. So we should be thinking about how do we invest resources in not only screening high status, high income, high asset populations, but conversely, flip it around to make sure that we bring along populations who have fewer assets. Now, if we're going to do that, we may be succeeding in narrowing health gaps, but we may be achieving health less efficiently in the aggregate. Well, that trade-off is a value. Now, I think it's okay. This goes back to where I started. I think it's okay to have that value. I think that value should be at the core of public health. What I'm trying to grapple with, I think what you and I have been grappling with in our conversations over the years, is how do we align that value with the work that needs to be done to bring along people who may not have that value? And that is what I see us trying to do with Purple Public Health, is pushing us collectively, academic world and the practice world, in the media world that touches on these issues, with these difficult concepts.
So practically then, what are we going to do?
So practically, every month we're going to take a topic. We will, by the way, get to reproductive rights in a few months. We need to warm up to it and to get to really difficult issues. And we are going to write an essay about it. We're going to do a podcast. Well, that's a royal we. You are doing the podcast. Will you bring on guests who can illuminate the topic? And we're going to put up on our website some collateral, things like reading lists and teaching guides and tools to help the user think about these issues and make comments on these issues so we can all learn from each other. So really, this is our effort to shape how we think when we think in public health. And I don't think either of us are entering this with an answer, although tell me now if you actually have an answer, but I certainly don't. But I hope that you and I can have this conversation a year from now and be more thoughtful about this than we are now.
Okay. I think I agree in general that
I'll take that
this
caveat.
That's what we're trying to do. I've been trying, like, as I was preparing for this, I was trying to figure out where you and I disagree or not disagree, just like what is the main driver for both of us thinking about this project. I'll just put my cards on the table. I fully agree with you in all the what you just mentioned right now. I think you and I have discussed this for a while. As someone who came in from clinical medicine in Sudan, but also then policy and then came to research, I do think there is a lot more space that needs to be filled for conversations that might feel uncomfortable for us in public health. And I've seen this even when I'm teaching classes. But I think the area that interests me the most, at least driving most of the conversations I'm having right now, is the inherent tension that we have in what type of trade-offs that we acknowledge versus not when we present an intervention or do an analysis. How do we get more comfortable with just talking about trade-offs in public health and thinking about trade-offs in a more matter-of-fact way instead of thinking about them from a moralistic way? But also, I think the biggest factor for me, at least, is I'm really grappling with the literature on paternalism versus autonomy. And what do we do as public health to engage with the inherently paternalistic nature of the field? And is there a way to engage more thoughtfully with autonomy as a guiding value for a lot of people who live in this country and across the globe? What are your drivers? Why are you interested in this project?
Yeah, so first of all, I think everything you laid out obviously resonates with me. And I think you actually laid out a really nicely an agenda for what we're trying to do over the next 12 months in that last few sentences. I suppose I take a step back further and say, what have I been interested in the past 25 years of my career when I've been in public health? And I'm interested in a field, in being part of a field that has as its mission, making sure as many people as possible live as long and healthy lives as possible. And what we do in the academy is we have the privilege and the responsibility of trying to generate the thoughts that underpin those efforts. So I'm interested in those thoughts. I've been interested in those thoughts for a while. And I think how we think, what we think about when we think about health evolves over time. And I see this question: how do we make sure that the thoughts and actions of public health can keep as many people as possible in the tent for as long as possible so that we can persuade populations about the steps needed to create health, is the question of our time. So I'm interested in this project as one way to nudge forward our thinking to the end that ultimately is what motivates me.
And for people who are listening to this, and both of us engaging in this exercise right now, and who say, but you can't really be serious. Yes, maybe public health needs to have this conversation. Maybe. I don't know if I believe you. But at the same time, like, you can't really worry about the color of your curtains if you feel like your house is burning right now. What do you say to people like those?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I suppose I always come back to what are we trying to do? And I want to make sure that public health is strong, robust, and vibrant 25 years from now, long after I have moved beyond my useful years. And I think that investing now in thinking about the foundations of the field is an important investment in that. And others may feel like there are other ways in which they can use their time and talents. And I not only do I respect it, I encourage that. I think it takes millions of us to advance the agenda of public health. I see this as a worthwhile use of my time, and I think you see it as a worthwhile use of your time. We are using who we are, the point in time where we are, the assets available to us to try to push forward a particular agenda. But in no way do I think that this is what everybody should be doing. I think others will have other ideas, and I want to learn from them and observe from them. I try very hard, I think you do as well, to look around me and learn from what others are doing. So I suppose my encouragement to anybody who thinks there are other things that should be done in the moment that are more priority is to do them. And I want to see them. I want to learn. I want to read them. I want to watch them. I want to learn from them.
I think that's very helpful even for me, as you know, and I think you texted me earlier this week telling me I am really overthinking this project, which I am, because I feel like it's a similar feeling I had with everything happening in Sudan, where I have a lot of colleagues who know exactly what they need to do in Sudan. Like they're going back to the country. Sudan, by the way, for those who don't know, it's undergoing a lot of conflict that is affecting a big part of the population. And for a while, I've been debating maybe it is more helpful for me just to go back to Sudan and be on the ground there. And like they need more doctors. We are having a full-blown civil war. But at the same time, I think I also struggle with like part of the work I'm doing right now, hopefully in Sudan, is thinking about how do we rebuild some of the infrastructure that got lost, especially the medical infrastructure and healthcare infrastructure in the country. I wake up every day wondering if I made the right decision or if my plan to just think more about how can I help with building their infrastructure. Is it really because I think that's the best place to be, or is it really because it's my luxury sitting here in St. Louis in the US and I get to pontificate and think generally about what needs to be done instead of being on the ground? I really don't know the answer to that. I have a similar feeling here where I feel like what type of place would benefit the most from having me? Is it me really thinking about like, how do we push through some of the issues we have right now where a big chunk of the population might not necessarily believe that vaccines are useful anymore? Like, should I be spending my day trying to persuade people or thinking about like, how do we get enough funding for public health as needed? Or is it really helpful for me to spend time thinking about the tensions between autonomy and paternalism in public health? I don't know the answer. I think it's very hard to know exactly what is the right answer, at least for me. But I do think, as you said, at least for now, it feels like this is the time and the space or what I think my energy should be spent. I would love to work on the future for public health 30, 50, 100 years from now. But I also really encourage people to do the best they can wherever they are. I think that might be the best place for us to be. So then how do we make sure this does not become a centrist rant for us both to think about how do we appeal to most people most of the time, which could be part of the danger?
I think, and this is paraphrasing Al Sommer, who used to be dean at Hopkins for many years, public health is an aspiration. Public health is a radical thing. It is this notion that all the people can live healthy, long lives is a radical concept. I went from clinical medicine to public health because I was moved by that radical concept. I have spent a career thinking about the social structural forces that generate health because I think it is critical to advance that radical concept. So I don't think there's anything centrist about this. I think there's something quite radical about this vision. The notion of centrism implies that the truth and wisdom lie either on the left or the right. And I suppose what Purple Public Health does is it says, given an unflinching commitment to a radical vision, how do we do what we do so that the world can get to that aspirational place better, faster, for more of us? And I don't think that is centrist in the way that word implies, which is soft, milquetoast, compromising. I think that actually is a pragmatic application of a really important higher calling.
So then does it mean if it's not centrist, is it depoliticized? Which would be a very interesting shift for you as someone who wrote about consequential epidemiology.
How could public health not be political? Public health is inherently political. I mean, the question is, what do we mean by political? Political fundamentally means how we as a society think about arranging the assets in the world around us. And if those assets are what's shaping health, of course public health is political. Being political does not mean it's partisan. Those are two very different concepts. And, I've also written about the need for a muscular public health. I wrote about that long before this whole bro culture emerged around us, which I'm not fully sure I understand what that means. But our cause is a worthwhile cause. The cause of people living healthy lives where they can flourish and do what they wish to do is worthwhile. And it is worthwhile to build the architecture of thought in the academy, of practice, of media and politics intersecting to advance that cause. That is what we are trying to do. And to come back to the a little bit of sort of the conversation we're having about, like, is this the right thing for you, Salma, to be doing? Is this the right thing for me, Sandro, to be doing today? That's obviously a very personal question. And I think that reflects on one's skills, one's assets at a particular point in time, one's voice, what else one can do in this shockingly short lifespan to make a difference. And I certainly don't know the answer to that, but it feels to me like thinking about the question is a step towards at least correcting and doing the right thing as much as possible for as long as possible.
And what would success look like for you if we're having this conversation? I think you mentioned a bit earlier.
Yeah, I think
next year.
Success is not needing this conversation anymore. I think success is making this obsolete. I think success is looking at the Purple Public Health Project as a quaint artifact of history. That's success. That these ideas are incorporated, public health shifts, evolves, moves, and we have different conversations. There are different questions that are important. That's success.
Yeah. Success for me, I think, is any question I discuss in class, I don't have to think first. If we're discussing this, are we discussing this in moralistic terms versus thinking we know our values, we know the science. We're trying to think what are the practical ways to actually get as many people as possible healthy. I think on a shorter term, success would be, and this was really driven, at least our work over the past month, I know we've been working on this for a while, was with a poll I saw that was done, I think, in November 2025, that asked registered voters in the US, do you think public health, I'm paraphrasing, I might be getting it wrong. What do you think motivates or drives public health officials? And 42% said they're driven by science, the results they have. 46% said they're driven by political values, or they're driven by political affiliations and what interests them. And I think that, to me, is a worrying sign. I would like for most people to think that most of the time, at least for us, we're all human, we're going to have our biases, that in public health, when we're doing an analysis, when we're thinking about what type of intervention we're proposing, we're generally thinking about the general health of the public. To me, that would look like success if we do this poll a year from now, or maybe a year from now is too optimistic, 10 years from now, those numbers would not look that way. I think to me, that would be success.
Your ambition is higher than mine, and I respect that. It's good. I suppose that's why we're a good team. Sometimes you articulate your ambition and you scare me. But that's good. I'm behind you.
Okay, perfect. And then if people asked, well, what we're doing is just maybe just selling public health, we need to communicate better. Like, what we're just changing is communication. Are they wrong? Are they right?
I think communication is part of it. But if it was just communication, I would feel like we should just launch the Better Communication Project. Communication is certainly part of it. And we as school here at WashU, as you know, we've invested in a health communication collaborative as a research network to really encourage moving communication. I think this is more foundational than that. I think this is getting at the core of how we think about what we should be thinking about. That's much more foundational. And yes, I'm not diminishing the importance of communication. I just think communication is a part of a larger ecosystem of what are we thinking about? How do we think about things? How do we create an approach that keeps people in and with us and persuades people, and then we can communicate about what we're trying to do.
Yeah, for me, hopefully what I think we're both doing is that we're really committing to think rigorously in public about public health. And we're hoping that along the way, we're actually changed by what we think about. My hope is that people would join us in thinking about how we think, how we act, and how we communicate in public health. Tell us where we got right, what we got wrong. How can we all collectively think of a better agenda, a more forward-thinking agenda for public health for the next, let's say, 25 years. I'm not going to say 10 years. I'm not going to say.
No, but I really like what you just said. That really captures nicely. What we're trying to do is we're trying to think rigorously in public about public health so that people can join, participate, have different ideas of their own. That feels right. That's what we're doing. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for articulating that.
Just to recap, we're going to start a podcast. Every month, we're going to have an episode that focuses on proper public health. We're also mostly going to be our thinking both on Substack, where we're going to launch in a week from now, but also you can look into our webpage, which we will link to here in the podcast, and where we'd have all of our recommended readings, also some of the other products that we discussed earlier. If you have any ideas of what would be interesting, what would people want to hear, what would people want to discuss, also feel free to reach out to us through the website. Looking forward to having this conversation for the next year.
Thank you, Salma.
Thanks, Sandro. This episode was edited by Catalina Melendez-Contreras, with marketing and outreach by Kinkini Bahaduri. The podcast is supported by the School of Public Health and the Frick Initiative at Washington University in St. Louis. You can find Complicating the Narrative wherever you get your podcast, and you can also watch the episodes on YouTube. If you found this conversation useful, rating, sharing, or recommending the podcast is one of the best ways to help us reach more people. Thank you for listening.